want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflakes here, back with a new Duels of Eden video. For today's video, I want to cover 3 vague categories I kind of came up with on the spot about 3 hours ago, and explain how they can kind of help you formulate a plan when it comes to deck building, play around your own deck, play around your opponent's deck, and how that can kind of make your onboarding experience with the game a bit easier because you now understand how these cards want to operate. And hopefully it makes sense. I'll try and show examples of these cards and what combos they enable and how they work in the game. But since I'm always in training tool, I don't really have many clips to show you guys in the game itself. I'll try and work on that in the future and analyze replays for that. But for now, this is what we can work with. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into my deck list so I can show you the cards and kind of summarize them really quickly, and then jump into my favorite mode and training mode to really show off all the things in there. So obviously, we have starters, pressure cards, and payoff cards. And essentially, these 3 categories represent the cards you're going to use to hit your spells, the cards you're going to use to make your opponent, kind of antsy and nervous about your spells, and then the cards that are really efficient and will help you close the game out faster and actually, punish your opponent for being hit by the other 2 categories. And so starter cards are just spells that are usually pretty fast, sometimes they're slow, but what they do is that they essentially set up your other spells so they can actually get something off of them. They usually don't combo into each other, but sometimes they do, which is why these categories are very vague. Active pressure cards are just cards that really cover a lot of space. They force your opponent to respect them or also take a lot of damage, and they also can act as starter cards depending on what card they are and what spells you have in your deck, but they're mainly just to make your opponent move and be nervous and really force them to respect what you have in your hand instead of just having to look for only the starter cards. Active and potential pressure are just cards that either, they actively pressure your opponent because they swing out and then your opponent has to respond to them swinging out. And then potential pressure cards are those cards that are so fast that your opponent has to kind of respect them before they come out. And if they aren't out of the range before you use them, they're almost always going to be hit, or they use a defensive ability to, counter that. And then payoff spells. Honestly, payoff spells could be kind of like potential pressure because they are insanely powerful for that specific area. But for the most part, you're not expecting to hit these without help from other cards unless you have a very, very hard read on your opponent. So these are cards that, again, will end the game way faster, they'll make your opponent way more nervous, and if your opponent gets hit by these and you hit them raw, you're gonna feel really good about yourself because you know that you weren't actually supposed to hit it without help, and you got an insane reward for that. So we'll go ahead and start with the starter cards. I want to show you guys kind of the frame data that's behind them and how they look, just in case you're kind of curious about it. I know that I've been saying a lot of words and maybe you need a visual representation of it. So stuff like Blink, this is a good starter card because it helps you kind of start combos, whether it's projectiles or certain melee spells. And the reason why I have it as a starter and not a pressure card is because the main purpose of Blink is to just start a combo. So we're going to put in Bouncing Blade and Ice Pick, and you're going to see that with Blink I can kind of just hit everything I want. Assuming that I hit it, I can use Blink into Sap W1 and then just do whatever I want afterwards. And all these spells I have in my hand, obviously they combo into each other, so you might be like, oh, maybe those are starters as well, but these are just cards that have good frame data. Blink is just the starter for it because it's really hard to react to. If we go to step frame, you can see that's using Blink itself is 1 frame, and then the pellet comes out 5 frames after. And if your opponent's caught in a animation, they won't be able to respond to it, which allows you to hit other buttons afterwards if you want to. And then stuff like Vortex is kind of like an active pressure card, but it's also a starter because it lets you hit 4 away. I can actually just use Rag for a lot of these examples because Rag is the slowest spell, and you can see how Vortex, if you're using Vortex, you can kind of run into Vortex, Entangle. It's just a very fast spell that doesn't quite hit the back row, but if your opponent's playing in any other column, you can kind of hit it, and then they're forced to be rooted. And obviously, root isn't a hard stun, so your opponent can use spells on you, they can dodge, they can shield, but it is a very strong spell that allows you to follow it up with very, laggy spells or lingering spells to punish your opponent. Pull is going to be the de facto melee starter spell. Obviously, if you hit it, you can do whatever you want in melee, whether it's double team or kinetic wave or push slash. Apprehend kind of falls into this as well, but Apprehend covers way less distance, and pull you can kind of use anywhere. And because of how strong the linear hitboxes are, you can kind of move. You have a bit of free time to do what you want before they get out of hit stun. Align probably needs no introduction, honestly. Align is kind of the premier starter card because it really lets you do whatever you want. You guys know what Align Ragnarok does, you guys know what Align Tetra does. It's just really the spell that will start your combos if you have your deck built around it. And then step slash auto slash might be a bit odd if you really don't know how to use step combos properly, but the reason why these are starters is because even though the combos they enable aren't really long unless you use very specific cards, they do enable combos within that short duration. So if I have stuff like Kunai and Bouncing Blade with Step Slash, if I manage to hit a straight on Step Slash, that's going to be both these cards casted, and that's a strong, short combo. Obviously I can always walk into it. If you walk once, it's not a really long combo, but it's still a starter nonetheless. And then obviously if you're using it from the back row, you can always walk and readjust yourself, and that's always going to be a combo as well, if you know how to press the buttons in the proper way. And so auto slash is going to be a very similar idea to that. And again, these are all cards that come out really quickly. Your opponent has to respect them when they exist, or else they kind of get whacked by a lot, because if you guys haven't really fought against this trio of cards, step slash, auto slash, push slash, these cards all come out really quickly, and they do a pretty good chunk of damage for what cost they are, and so you really have to respect them. Oh, that's been nerfed enough to be a gap 2 these days. This push slash step slash combo used to be true a few months back, but now it's not. But like, for example, these spells kind of break the mold, because not only are they good starter spells, they also are really good pressure because they're so fast and cover so much area, and they also pay off decently because of their efficiency. But stuff like Downfall, a bit more of a precise starter, but if I have Downfall, you can see that with Ragnarok even, if I hit it while I'm on the top column, it's a gap 4, but anywhere below, there's a true combo if you're fast enough to recognize it. And then Kinetic Wave, it's another spell that does a ton of stuff. Like, it's so generous with the amount of time you have after you hit it. You can hit Rag, you can hit Triple Barrel, you can hit the World, you can even like set up a Bow Snipe, and Bow Snipe really doesn't like connect it to anything because it takes so long to come out. Like, that's just how ridiculous this spell is. Obviously, Bow Snipe isn't quite perfect, but you can cast Kinetic Wave, hit Bow Snipe, and cast something else, and there's more than enough time to hit it all. So Kinetic Wave is a pretty ridiculous spell as a starter, just a bit hard to hit, obviously. And then the active pressure spells, like I said earlier, these are all spells that will be high pressure once they're out and about. So stuff like Northwind, you can combo off Northwind, so it could be considered a starter, but because your opponent can hit step, because your opponent has so much time to walk around, it's more just a signal for your opponent to be like, okay, they could punish off of it, I could shield, I could dodge it, I have to think about how I'm going to address the spell, and that's how it's pressure. Same thing with Flame Breath, it covers a pretty big area that your opponent has to respect, because if we do hit it and they're fast enough, they could technically combo off it, and that's really scary. Vivisection, active pressure because you put 3 projectiles out on the map, and again, it's not bad as a starter, but your opponent has to kind of be hit by it, and your enemy has to be, or you have to be really ready to punish off of it, and it's mainly just to get your opponent to move and be antsy and understand that if they don't walk, they're going to be hit by a pretty powerful spell. Boomerang, you guys, it's one of the common anti-camping cards. Diagonal Beam shoots out a gigantic beam that will pressure your opponents because it's like really hard to wrap your brain around how it moves. Frost Barrage obviously lingers a long time. Minigun, you guys might have saw it on my Payoff cards, but it's just like a spell that like your opponent can't walk into that line for a bit, because if they do, then they'll be hit stunned. Inverter is another card that could be a starter, could be a Payoff, but it's more just pressure if you're using it at the basic level, because like Vivisection, you can cover a lot of space very easily. Beam Crystal and Bomb. These Beam Crystal and Bomb are all spells that exist for a very long time, so the pressure because they exist and your opponent knows that if you interact with them or you have spells that set them up, they'll be punished pretty hard. And then Glitter is kind of just the de facto active pressure spell, because it just covers your opponent's board and forces them to walk around to not get hit. Oops. And then passive pressure or potential pressure, obviously again, it's just cards that your opponent has to respect. So if I have Apprehend, for example, my opponent should be concerned about walking into the front 2 columns because I have Apprehend, my combo them. Same idea with Push Slash, my combo them. Same idea with Double Team, like if they're in the front 2 columns and I catch them, or if they're in the front 2 columns, that's like about the only range I can catch them in. So I have to respect those ranges and kind of, you know, move defensively around those, because if my opponent hits them, I'm going to be comboed. Backstab is the very common or very premier back row pressure card, because if you have it, your opponent obviously can walk into it because you have to cast it, but they're going to be a bit more afraid to walk into it because it does 6 damage for 1 mana, which is a lot of damage, and obviously it combos into stuff like Whirl and Chiretta stuff and a lot of other cards. Like mentioned earlier, Step Slash, Auto Slash are going to kind of have another appearance here. These spells, people keep... these spells aren't really reactable. They come out frame 18 for the most part, so if your opponent is using them, it's almost always going to be because they were already moving around it, right? So if I put the bot to use Step Slash, or even just make the bot like randomly use these spells on hard mode, like I want to try and shield. You can see that like I can shield, but that's all slash from a further range, so the time is a bit shorter. It actually is a bit easier to counter it now, but you can see that they cover a lot of space, and I'm in practice tool, so I have time to like actually see them react. But if I'm in a live environment where I actually have ping, which is obviously very common in this game, you can see here that I'm actually getting that shield in time, and I'm preemptively shielding a lot of time as well. Like it's actually, I'm like, you can see like the shield break animation coming out. So even on 0 ping, obviously I'm talking to you guys through this thing, but it's like very hard for me to react with shield in time. And so what is easier to do is you just walk around, and by walking defensively you can actually avoid these spells very easily. But it's another idea of like you have to see where your opponent is and respect how they can use that spell so that you can avoid these spells altogether. Because like yeah, I can shield on 0 ping, but being able to shield on 0 ping is not what the game's actually like. If I put the delay maybe higher, I can show it off, but this is like, obviously 9 frame delay is very, very high, but it's probably more indicative of what's gonna look like on ping. So you can see, I'm like trying to preemptively hit it. Probably set the bot to spells only. I can see here that it's way harder for me to hit it because this is more like what I see online, where there's gonna be a long delay, like there's gonna be a bit of time where I can't see what the guy's doing, and the first animation will cut out. So again, on 0 ping, like I could probably hit like shield Step Slash a lot, but on any amount of ping, it's gonna be way less likely because the animation won't be actually true to form. So that's why those 2 cards are on there. And then yeah, that's gonna be probably it for the active pressure cards with that explanation. Oh, I guess. Oh, I didn't actually talk about the rest of them, did I? I got so caught up in the Step Slash stuff that I skipped the other ones. So Minigun comes out super, super fast. It's like one of the fastest spells in the game, so your opponent has to kind of clear the row you're in, or else they can get comboed, or just take 8 damage. Acid Rain also comes out quite fast, and there is counterplay against Acid Rain, like you can shield in between the hits pretty easily. So like if I get hit here, I can hold shield, and you see that I shield the other hit. But it's just a spell that, again, you have to walk around a bit more because you can see that it hits exactly 4-way in a pretty big circle. So just be aware of that. And then the last spell, I already forgot it, but all those potential pressure spells, again, are just spells that you have to kind of look for. Tsunami and Warp Raise, yeah. So it's like Tsunami, very similar to Push Slash and everything else. You have to avoid being in the front row because it comes out super quickly. And then Warp Raise is a very good pressure spell because if you're above them, they can hit you for 14, or maybe they're Hazel and they can knock you into the laser, but you just have to really respect that top laser specifically. And then Payoff spells, these probably won't require as much of an explanation, but these are just spells that, you know, they're pretty hard to hit. Like obviously Thunder is 1 tile, Whirl is 1 tile, Shotgun and Shear are kind of breaking the rules a bit because they do cover a lot. Like Shotgun is kind of a pressure card as well, but it's a lot slower than the other pressure cards I had on there were, and therefore it also combos into less. You have to actually think of a combo to hit it. I'm trying to find where the reset position button is. I'm having a brain fart. So yeah, like obviously Shotgun, it is pretty fast, but it's not that fast. And then Shear is a really good potential pressure card because it does cover a lot and it does a ton of damage, but you're usually comboing into it, so like If you have auto slash, you can combo into sheer. If you have pull, you can combo into sheer. It's just a card that's way more reliable if you're, you know, using something into it, because 2 mana for 11 damage is a lot of damage. Triple Barrel, Ragnarok. Obviously, Triple Barrel is a card that is way better to get the back row, because if your opponent is not in the back row and you hit them from earlier, then what they can do is they can get hit, hold shield, and then walk down, right? So it's a payoff card. Obviously, it does a lot of damage for its cost, but if your opponent knows how to play around it, it's way harder. I don't know why I keep removing all the spells. I think Ragnarok, you guys know what Ragnarok does. Tetra, it is kind of a potential pressure card, but the corners are a lot more conditional than most of the other pressure cards. So you want to like usually like downfall them into Tetra. You want to use Chiretta W1 to loop them into the top row for Tetra. You want to align into Tetra. It's all stuff like that. And then I forgot what the other payoff cards were, but it is again very similar of an idea where you're just like using it after you hit somebody into it, because that's how you eventually get more damage done. And obviously, there are plenty of spells that don't really necessarily fall into these categories. Like, if we were to talk about something like Spear Wave. Spear Wave is really fast. It also does pretty good damage, and it's a payoff from getting spears. And so this is what I mean by these categories aren't necessarily super indicative of what the cards do. Like something like let's see, something like Armor Drop isn't really active pressure or neutral pressure or combo starters, simply spawn to block. And that's because it's more of a structure spell, and it can be used as cover, it can be used as a melee combo if you're not Hazel, it can be used to give your spell some more life, like Amplifier. Amplifier would probably be like an active pressure spell in that scenario. You have stuff like Monsoon, which is not really pressure at all, but it is really annoying, and it forces your opponent to play a certain way. So, and again, obviously cards that then cover, like Strip Mine is obviously an active pressure spell. Shield Throw is kind of not really a payoff spell because it combos, like very little combos into it. Obviously certain spells do, like a lot of starters will combo to Shield Throw, like a Line for example. A Line will combo to Shield Throw, Kinetic Wave will combo to Shield Throw, even Auto Slash, I believe, will combo to Shield Throw. So again, these starters are meant for these slower payoff cards, but I guess, yeah, Shield Throw is a payoff card I didn't really think about. Guillotine, super slow. How will you hit Guillotine? You're going to use a starter to hit somebody into it. Like Kinetic Wave, Guillotine is so slow that even Kinetic Wave won't be able to combo into it as a true combo. But that's when, again, you just use another spell because Kinetic Wave is so privileged. You just like hit them, install them in there. And yeah, that's pretty much it for these cards. Again, don't take the categories super seriously. Just use them as a guideline for when you're building decks or playing around cards or trying to understand how decks work. Almost every deck will always have a mixture of these three categories in a healthy amount. And if they're missing like starters, for example, maybe you're just using Chiretta, because Chiretta has two of the best starter weapons in the game. That's the reason why that's why she can use cards like Triple Barrel without using Kinetic Wave, because with her W2, if you do hit your opponent at the front row, well then suddenly it doesn't matter that you don't have Kinetic Wave. You can always use W2 for either of these combos, right? So if you're playing a card that needs more pressure, or if you're playing a deck that needs more pressure, you can play someone like Saffron or Dreadworm. If you need a deck that needs more starters, you can play someone like Chiretta. If you need someone who needs to have a good payoff, Shiso is pretty good with payoffs if you know how to use his Aftershock and Slip Gun. They're not as strong as they were before, but they still do really good damage. Again, Maple, very good potential pressure, quote unquote, in her W1, and the list goes on and on. Like Reva, super good pressure in her W1. Nira, pretty good active potential pressure in her W1, W2, so on and so forth. So if you have any questions, please let me know. This video ended up going a bit longer than I wanted to, but hopefully I kind of gave good examples of everything and explained it all through. Again, hope you guys have a good day or night wherever you are. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.